What was the scariest we need to leave now gut feeling that you've ever experienced? Surfing a fairly secluded reef break, offshore across a channel. This place is in a very southern state of Australia. Overcast weather, but a still amazing day for the waves. I was surfing with only one other guy. We were trading waves and getting to know each other in between sets. I asked what he did for a living, and he was a marine biologist. We'd both recently moved to the area and were new to surfing it as well. Despite it being extremely good surf, after 40 minutes he says, "I don't like this. Something feels off. I feel like I'm being watched, like I'm bait." I didn't want to leave as it was excellent surf, but this guy was a marine biologist, so I took his instinct as a sign to play it safe. We paddled back across the deep channel together as quickly as we could without panicking, and walked the 15 minutes trek back to the car park talking shit the whole way. I got his mobile number for future surfs together, given how small town it is here and not knowing anyone. We noticed a 15-foot inflatable boat pull up near the reef and hang around for a bit without much thought. Later that night, while looking at my social media, I read about 3 fishermen at the same location we were at that morning, at the same time, in their boat. As they pulled up to check their cray pots on the beach side of the reef, they were circled twice by a great white shark that was as big as their boat. That guy most likely saved me from a horrible experience that day. I messaged him with the link to the Facebook page with the comments regarding their experience. Chills ran through my body for a good 20 minutes. He was adamant he felt the presence of something, and he was right. Years ago, when I was still living at home with the parents, I drove home around 2 a.m. As I parked my car, I noticed a man walking down the street. I decided to wait until he passed my car and was far enough for me to get out. However, instead, he passed my car and hid behind the van that was directly parked behind me. I guess he didn't think I was paying attention to him. So I called my dad, who was asleep, to come down and get me. He did. And when the guy saw my dad, he immediately ran away. I was lucky. Viewing to see a flat that didn't exist. Not my story, but one my mum told me from her 20s when she was living and working in London, UK. I'll do my best to retell it. Also, I'm dyslexic, so apologies in advance for grammar. This story always gives me the creeps though when I think about it. So back in her 20s, my mum was living in London and looking to move into a slightly bigger place. She'd found a really good price for a flat slightly out from the area she was hoping. She'd called the agent to book a viewing, and that's when things turned odd. So the guy booking the viewing started asking weird requests and questions, such as to bring her passport, her age, race, and physical appearance. Would she be coming on her own? Did she have a car, or would she be getting the bus? He very persistent that she should arrive by bus as it would be easiest for her. Explains it was a straight road down from the bus stop to the apartment block. Obviously quite unnerved by this call, but still interested because the flat looked ideal. She and my dad, who were dating at the time, decided to check the exterior and surrounding area. The day before the viewing, they drove there. First passing the bus stop, he was indicating her to arrive via. From the bus stop, there was about 150 out of 200 meters of derelict wasteland that she would have to walk past to get to the flat. And standing at the end of the street in the location this apartment block should have been was a huge abandoned building. Smashed broken windows, graffiti, no entry signs, the lot. Definitely nothing inhabitable in sight. Still, when she tells this today, you can see how much it rightly shook her. Of course, she didn't go to her viewing. However, she informed the police, advising them of the planned time and place. From what she saw, from following up with them, they didn't appear to take this tip seriously, and little was done. A couple years later though, while in a pub with some friends, she gets chatting to a guy she just met through mutual friends that night. He was in the police, and through conversation her story came up. He said that that area at the time of her viewing had a huge human trafficking problem. Still gives me chills. When I was about 8 in 1985, an old El Camino pulled up alongside my friend and I with a man saying he knew my mom. He did know her name, but something felt off, so I grabbed my friend and ran. When we told my mom, she went white and called the cops. Turns out this guy thought my mom had stolen his job at the steel mill she worked at the time and wanted to hurt her. He already had a warrant out for nearly killing his wife that morning. When I was 16, my mom had a terrible feeling about an outing some friends and I were going on. Hindsight being 2020, it was a stupid move for me to go anyway, but I did. Long story short, there was a car accident. My 2 best friends died, and I nearly did. It'll be 30 years in November. I still regret getting in that car every day. My friends might still be alive if I hadn't. My mom had that mama spidey sense. She still does. More recently, I was at our other house in the country with my oldest son and his wife and kids. There was a break in the storms, and my son decided to go home instead of spending the night. I was filled with dread at the thought of them going home so late, since we were dealing with intermittent but severe storms. So much dread that I started crying and begging them not to leave. Thankfully, they agreed. We all started home the next morning with them following me and my husband. We came up on this stretch of road that we know has no lights at night to see police barricading a washed-out bridge and cranes retrieving cars. We all piled out of our cars to ask the officers what happened. Apparently, there were several cars that had kept going, not knowing the bridge was out. The lone survivor in the first car had told the police that they went off the bridge at about 9:30 p.m. That's about the time my son wanted to leave. My husband just looked at me, and my boy hugged me extra tight because he knew what could have happened. After graduating undergrad, I was working as a caseworker for individuals with developmental disabilities and got assigned a new case for a young man who had autism and severe behavioral concerns. I met him at his grandmother's house since she had custody of him since his parents weren't around. I think mom was in prison. Met this young man who was probably about 6 feet tall and weighing around 250 pounds, but had the developmental capacity of a 5-year-old child with a hairpin trigger temper. The house he was living in was absolutely destroyed, with the other piece of furniture that was not smashed up was an oversized beanbag chair in the living room. Grandma gave up trying to send the kid to school since he would absolutely destroy the place if he was forced to go. Grandma was no peach, but I felt for her and wanted to help. One of the meetings I was having with them, the kid, and Grandma seemed especially tense, like pacing around the room and smacking the walls. After about an hour of trying to get stuff done and realizing that it was not going to happen on this trip, it happens in this line of work, I decided to call it since the kid was becoming more and more agitated. Grandma was annoyed I would have to come back again, but we scheduled for a week or so out and left my business card with a reminder of the appointment. I leave to go back to my home state for a few days. And when I get back, I get called into my supervisor's office. I guess the night I left, the kid had a complete breakdown and beat his grandmother to death. No one noticed until the kid came wandering outside after a day or two covered in blood. I probably missed everything by less than 3 hours. Me and my little sister went camping in the woods very close to our house when we were kids. We'd seen this bald guy with a blue shirt and a dog walking around, which isn't unusual for the area. You'll often see people walking and say hello. For some reason though, I just got this tight feeling in my chest, and my sister must have too because we both just gave each other this look. I don't know what it was that made me do it, this is very out of character for me, but I took a photo of the back of him as he was walking away. A while later, we see the same guy again near the lake. He comes over and asks about the tent we're carrying, where we'll be setting up, and are we camping with our dad? We say yes, we're just going to see him now. A lie. We must have had the same moment of psychicness because we walked off up a fork in the path until we were out of view, then looked at each other and jumped down a path hidden by the bushes and waited behind them on the parallel trail for a bit. The guy watched us walk off, pretended to play with his dog until he couldn't see us, then turned around and ran up the path after us. Thankfully, he didn't see us hidden and carried on up straight where he thought we'd gone. We decided camping was a bad idea and went home. That evening, my mom shows us a post in the local residents group, which is a picture of the same bald guy trying to break into someone's house. Apparently, he'd just been walking around trying people's front doors and claimed to be a repair guy when he was stopped. I dread to think what his intentions were, but it was very lucky me and my sister knew those woods so well, otherwise we wouldn't have thought to go down one of the hidden paths. I was 12 at the time, and my favorite thing in the world was spending the night at my grandma's house. We lived in the sticks at the time, and my grandma lived closer to the nearest town. Thursday night was grandma's night. I felt something off one Thursday night and asked my mom if I could just stay home with my mom and dad. They reluctantly agreed. I went home, watched some TV, and went to bed. My bedroom was on the adjoining wall to the living room. I wasn't really asleep, but I heard my mom keep saying my dad's name over and over again, with a hint of panic. I sneak out to the living room, and my dad is on the couch with his head tilted back, snoring, really loud, which wasn't uncommon, but my mom was beside him, shaking him and telling him to wake up. She yelled at me to go back to bed. I didn't, obviously. I snuck to their bedroom to call 911. I told the dispatcher that my dad was asleep, and my mom was trying to wake him up, but she couldn't. Eventually, the phone call went to the living room, and my mom talked to the dispatcher. They sent an ambulance to the middle of nowhere. My dad had taken a bottle of diazepam to try to commit suicide. I remember sitting on the floor and holding his hand and repeating over and over that I loved him. The ambulance came and took him to the hospital, lights and sirens the whole way. We didn't know what happened during that time, but we found out a day or so later, and that is when our world changed. I am very sure if I did not call 911 that night, that my dad would have succeeded, and it would have probably have drove my mom over the edge as well. And I have no idea why I didn't want to stay the night at my nanny's. I just had that feeling that I needed to go home. Thank you for watching. Write comments, put likes. Do not forget to watch other videos.